So, do you guys ever look back to when you first started listening to podcasts? You throw in like first you're on YouTube, you get some clips, you watch the clips. Okay, cool, cool. And then one day, you go on a long drive or whatever, and you think, oh, maybe I should listen to that podcast, from that clip. And you listen to the podcast and you get really invested in the people talking in the podcast, almost as if like you're a little kid and you're hanging out with your dad and your dad's talking to his friends or whatever, and you're kind of just listening, because you don't have anything to say. You're a little kid. Um, and in this sense, you're kind of just listening in on a conversation that you're unable to speak on because you're not there, you're not with those people. And it brings on this like, sure, like some of them aren't that interesting, but it really makes the drive go by. And say you listen to one really good podcast where it feels like, those times when you go back, you're hanging out with your friends, you meet some new friends, and it's just like it's such a good time. It feels like things are gonna be good forever with you and those friends, that you're gonna grow old together and you're gonna live on your own little neighborhood with them living over there in that house and your other friend living in the other house next to you. And you're just gonna be all happily ever after because that conversation, that hangout session was just such a good time. But then a few days pass and you just can't get that feeling again with those friends. You can't bring that conversation back to that point where it was so exciting and new and novel and you connected and you felt like you really knew each other and it was amazing, and you just can't get that feeling back. You can't get back to that high in a way. And I think podcasts, at least for me, I remember I listened to this really good podcast series with, of course, it was with Joe Rogan, Duncan Trussell, and Chris Ryan. And I listened to this podcast and it like blew my mind, and I loved, and their chemistry kind of made the chemistry in my head go off. And it felt, I felt that very same sensation of hanging out with a good group of friends and having an amazing conversation with them. And I had that high from that, and I kept listening to more and more of them. I listened to Chris Ryan's podcast, Tangentially Speaking, and Dunker Trussell Family Hour, more Joe Rogan podcasts, and a few other podcasts, right? And and even starting my own podcast. And I'd be listening to these podcasts. It first started only on long drives, and then eventually I started listening to them like while I did tedious tasks like cleaning the house or etc. And now I listen to them while I'm at work. And I'm getting to the point where I can't I just can't find that high again. I can't, like, I keep looking for new content that really, they're really like, oh man, that was a great conversation, that brings me back to that sensation in real life of, meeting a really good friend and having a great connection with them. And I'm realizing that I'm basically substituting friendship with podcasts. Not only that, I'm substituting paying attention to what's going on in front of me with podcasts because my attention span is totally limited when I'm listening to podcasts, especially while I'm working. And I do things like half as quickly. And I realized that with the advent of streaming services such as Spotify, listening streaming services specifically, the content can just keep going. You can just keep listening to music. You can just keep listening to podcasts because you can still look, you can still think, you don't have to like sit in one spot and look at something the whole time, like reading or watching a movie, right? With podcasts and music, with say Spotify, Apple Music, you can just keep listening, just keep listening all the time, and it never ends. It's just constantly there's a voice in your ear, people talking or music playing, and it's like you want to keep listening to it because you turn it off and now it's all boring again. Oh, I gotta pay attention to work. You pay attention to work, and it's like you want to get that same reward from the podcast, but you can't anymore. It's just you can't get back to that high from listening to old Joe Rogan episodes or old tangentially speaking episodes where everything was new and novel. But then these people, eventually it's not new and novel anymore, and you don't get to that same level of chemistry anymore that you had with those earlier episodes. So now it's like all it is I mean, it's like being a drug addict. And it is a drug. It's like it's a substitute for friendship. That's what it is, a substitute for a really good time with a friend. That's what listening to a podcast is. Just listening to it over and over and over again, constantly, constantly, constantly. And it's like basically you're listening to these things so you can't even think for yourself, because if you're constantly listening to podcasts and music, like where are your thoughts? Your thoughts are kind of in the back burner because you're just taking all this content and you only have one language processor. Only one language processor. So if you're processing all that language, then you're not taking in anything else from anything. I mean, that's exactly what the deep state wants, right? That's exactly what they want. They want you to keep listening to nonstop content so that you, the individual, can't think for yourself. At least that's how I feel. I feel psychologically mutilated from all the podcasts I listen to. I feel like my brain is rotting from all the podcasts I listen to. Like each and every day, part of my brain is being ripped out of me, and I feel weak. I feel drained. I feel like I'm getting battered over the head every day, and the energy and the life getting sucked out of me from just constantly nonstop listening. Anyways, hope this podcast episode isn't a part of one of your binges. But if it is, I really hope that once you turn it off, you just walk away and go listen. Just listen to your thoughts, listen to a fan running, listen to anything other than what's coming out of earbuds. Because I see people with their earbuds in 24/7. They just have them in all the time. And it's like they're not listening to the world around them. They're not there. They're not present. They're in another reality, right? It's an escapism. You're trying to escape. We listen to these podcasts because we want to be sitting in the Joe Rogan studio. We want to be sitting getting interviewed by this interesting person, right? We want to be that interesting person that they're interviewing, but we're not. We're fucking working a boring ass job, doing boring shit, maybe driving 8 hours to somewhere. And we want to escape. I can tell you right now that being here right now in the moment, listening to your thoughts or your friend's thoughts, your girlfriend's thoughts, or just listen to a freaking fan or a river running or cars driving by. It's a hell of a lot better than pretending that you're somewhere you're not. That's my 2 cents. Peace out, guys.